give Sue the courtesy of introducing her this evening. Evaluating Sue this evening will be Mrs. Jean Jelly. Jean, could you please inform the group what Sue will be talking about and from which group?
Okay. Sue will be speaking from the Competent Communication Manual, and she's presenting her first speech from the Entertainers Speaking Manual. The objectives for Sue's speech tonight is entertain the audience by relating a personal experience, organise an entertaining speech for maximum impact, and her speeches will run from 5 to 7 minutes. I also want to mention that Sue's actually stepped in tonight to do the speech, so she wasn't actually fully prepared for it, but I'm sure we'll have a great evening with Sue tonight. Thank you.
Sue's been a member of Sandbelt Toastmasters for 15 months, and during that time she's competed at club competitions and presented speeches at other clubs to help gain valuable experience at public speaking. She's currently the Vice President of Membership for the Sandbelt Toastmasters, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Sue Butterworth with Taking a Bite. Please welcome Sue Butterworth, Taking a Bite. Sue Butterworth.
Who remembers where they were on September 11, 2001? Does anyone remember what happened September 11, 2001? I don't think there's many of us who wouldn't. It was something that changed the world that we live in forever. I remember it because at the time I was working for an American company called McCormick Foods. And at the time we had several people over in the States, and we also had several Americans in Australia who were very concerned about their work colleagues back in America. It was about 11:30 at night. I was getting into bed when my husband came in and said, "My God, come and have a look at what's on the television." So out I went and watched what was unfolding. About 2 o'clock in the morning I went to bed myself, wondering, what was going to happen overnight while I was asleep. I think Ashley stayed up most of the night. The next morning when we were having breakfast, I remember my children asking questions. Connor was, actually, how old was Connor? Connor was about 8 or 9. And funnily enough, a few weeks previous, there'd been something on 60 Minutes about the conflict over the Gulf and all that sort of thing. And Connor was trying to get his head around the fact that children over there had guns and would use them to kill people. And they were his age or not much older, and he just couldn't get his head around the idea that these children were killing people and thinking that we were bad. And me trying to explain to him that different religions perceive other people differently and that, these things happen. And I remember Madison, she's only tiny little thing, so it really didn't mean anything to her. But the one comment that has really stuck with me, and I often relate when I talk about September 11, is what Brandon said. Brandon's now 13, so at the time he would have been 5. And he was watching it. He stood there and he was staring at the television. And he turned to me and said, "Mummy, is that real?" And I said, "Yes, sweetheart, it is." And he said to me, "Don't they realise that they could hurt people doing that?" And I thought, the innocence of youth. So that still, upsets me when I think about it. And that moment, I think, is when Brandon lost his innocence at 5, seeing something like that on the television. The thing I want to talk to you about tonight is 2 years ago, I had the chance to go to New York, Big Apple, for work. And it was a conference that we were going to and a trade show and all that sort of thing. But prior to going to the trade show, my boss said to the other guy and I that were going, "Mark, we're spending all this money to go to America. Let's take a couple of days in New York to do some sightseeing." So I had the privilege of having a look around in New York and seeing all the different things that were there, including where the World Trade Center was and various other things as well. Now, he'd travelled to the States previously, prior to all of this happening, and had seen what America was like. And the thing that struck my boss, Lyndon, when we got there was the security that was now in place around New York and the airports and things like that. And we now have to allow hours of extra time to be able to get through checkpoints and take your clothes off and put handbags through and your shoes and your belts and just about everything except your underwear comes off. And you have to feed it through conveyors and they wave things up and down on you and all this sort of rigmarole to get in and out of airports and anywhere you want to go. So we arrived in New York and the first day we were there, we went sightseeing. We decided to go to the Statue of Liberty. And when we got there, before we got on the ferry, there was a tent, and we had to go through the whole rigmarole to get in. And when we got off at the other side before we could go up the statue, we had to go through the whole rigmarole. I'm not quite sure where they thought we were hiding things between the ferry and the statue. Not quite sure of that. But everywhere you went, you had to go through this. The second day that we were there, we went to the Fire Museum, which isn't something that a lot of people go to, probably because a lot of people don't know that it's there. But with my boss being involved with the CFA, that was one of the things we found when we were looking for tourist attractions. So we went along to the museum, and it's run by the retired firemen. And the guys there were incredibly interesting in the stories they told. And they told us a lot of stories about September 11th. And in fact, one entire room, about the size of this room, is devoted to September 11th. It has a memorial in the middle of it with photographs of all of the firefighters who died that day. It has artefacts around the room, helmets, tools, books, papers, you name it, artefacts from the fire brigade from on that day are in that room. In fact, there was a helmet, one of the big tall helmets, in a case with a dent in it, still covered in dust from the site. I took a few photos there, I didn't take heaps. When I talk about it, I get really upset because I think the dust that's on that is the bones and the building and all the people who died there. It was just the most incredible place to go and one of the most sobering experiences I've ever had. The three of us stood in there and we had tears running down our face. And then there was a photograph that was taken at another fire brigade, and it had all the jackets lined up, one behind the other, with the men's names on them. And it had a sign underneath, and it said that they were keeping their jackets safe for when they came home. And that just did me in, I was in tears. So from there we went to the site and stood there and looked into it. And in the middle of the site, after they pulled the buildings down, a cross formed out of girders, and it's still there. They've moved it a couple of times, and it's actually got pride of place in the middle of the site, these two girders. When they just tore off and they formed a cross. And I thought it was one of the most poignant moments, was standing there looking at that and thinking, all else prevails, that we can still hold tight to our faith. So I just thought I'd share that with you this evening. It's probably one of the most memorable moments that I had, even though it's work related. But it was a day that probably changed my life, realising how much the people who were there went through and the people that were lost. Our third and final speaker this evening is Gary Harkness, and evaluating Gary will be Cameron Wade. Cameron, can you please tell us what manual Gary is performing from and provide timing, please?
Gary's doing his third project from Competent Communication, and the objectives of this speech are to select a speech topic and determine its general and specific purposes, organise the speech in a manner that best achieves those purposes, ensure the beginning, body and conclusion reinforce the purposes, and project sincerity and conviction and control any nervousness you may feel. And the time allocation is 5 to 7 minutes.
Thank you, Cameron. Gary Harkness has been a member of Sandbelt Toastmasters for the last 8 months. During that time, he's embraced the Toastmaster vision and mission. Gary, in fact, has recently taken up the post of President for Sandbelt